Tumbleweed here with an excerpt from one of my Tumbleweed sagas, Long Larry Dunn, an historical fiction novel about my great-great-grandfather, Nicholas Dunn. Now, Nick's son, John Francis, he built a reputation that made his father right proud. And notably, my own father was named John Francis, so it seems that respect for my great-uncle John was widespread in the Dunn family. My thanks to my cousin Johnny Dunn for much of this story. And please forgive me as this 4-minute video is just a tad longer than usual. So here's the excerpt. I'd be remiss here not to mention one of the notable exploits of my son, John Francis. He was the 8th of our 9 children. Let it be said that few fathers could be as proud of their sons as I was of John. He was born in 1870, and I started to teach him the beeves business about as soon as he could sit a saddle. I also managed to send him off for just a bit of education at St. Mary's College up in San Antonio. He even served the Texas Rangers as a special member, given his great tracking skills. Now, before I knew it, he was all grown up and shifted his attention from teasing his sisters to buying his own ranch near Alice, and he stocked it with upwards of 1,000 Hereford and 50 registered bulls. John's early experiences with the Texas Rangers drew him to San Antonio in 1898, as Teddy Roosevelt was gathering his Rough Riders there for training in preparation for heading off to Cuba. The Rough Riders were officially called the 1st U.S. Volunteer Cavalry, and it turned out that the name Rough Riders was a name first used by a news correspondent named Richard Houlihan, and it stuck despite initial protests from Roosevelt. Go figure. Now, John was ready to volunteer, joining with men of a broad mix of backgrounds, from nattily-dressed Eastern College boys to frontiersmen with nicknames like Rocky Mountain Bill and Rattlesnake Pete and Lariat Ned and Bronco George. John told me he was impressed with Roosevelt, who, after an initial stay at the Menger Hotel, camped with his men at their training facility in Riverside Park. He thought Roosevelt was also a good judge of horseflesh, as he purchased his horse privately to suit his riding preferences, rather than accept a standard-issue Army nag. Ultimately, John decided that his Texas Ranger tracking experience wasn't going to be a fit for the expedition to Cuba, and he bade farewell to the Rough Riders. Now, John quickly matured to become a successful rancher and a tough-minded, no-nonsense businessman who would also eventually own an interest in the Citizen State Bank in Alice. My son was tough, as they say, a chip off the old block. To illustrate, he shared a story about how one day he was standing in that bank, leaning against the counter, with his right foot up on a brass footrail. Keep in mind that John was a tall man, having inherited his great-grandfather's height. The incident went something like this. An itinerant with a grudge against John strode into the bank, walked up to him and said, "You son of a bitch, you and your bank ruined my life." And he kicked John's foot off the rail. Well, it was said that the split second of silence, you could easily have cut the air inside that bank like melted butter with a dull-out knife. Without hesitation, John let loose with a single punch that separated this man from several of his front teeth and dropped him to the floor. Now, upon standing back to assess the damage and dust himself off, John noticed that one of his cufflinks was missing. Without yet uttering a word, he proceeded to grab the beaten man by the scruff of his neck and lead him around the floor until the cufflink was found. By this time, the intruder, with blood all over his face and dirt ground into his elbows and knees from scrounging around the floor of the bank, was beginning to come to. John unceremoniously dragged that son of a gun to the front door and kicked the man out of the bank. Looking back, it always brought a smile to my lips, imagining John's performance. I sure wish I'd been there. Now, here's where this story takes a fascinating turn. The beaten man happened to be a Ku Klux Klan member, so he dragged himself off and complained to the Klan, asking that they tar and feather this man who had beaten him up. Well, when the itinerant told the Klansmen it was John Francis Dunn that had whipped him, the Klan wanted no part of the incident. Such was the reputation of the Dunn family in South Texas. Now, these stories are true to the best of my knowledge and validated from family archives and conversations with Dunn descendants. And by the way, John did marry and raised 5 children. While most of my Tumbleweed sagas are pure fiction, I am struck by the adventure in the actual lives of my own ancestors in Texas that I'm able to share in Long Larry Dunn. To learn more, go to my website at tumbleweed.me and stay tuned for publication of Tumbleweed Sagas beginning in spring of 2019. Meanwhile, y'all have a great day.